Hello and welcome to this demo of Beeceptor. My name is Vijay and my team is Pilot Black Squad. So in this video, we're going to be looking at what exactly Beeceptor is and how we use it in our project and how you can use it in yours. It's pretty easy to set up and install, so it doesn't really take a lot of time. So before we go with Beeceptor exactly, let's first look at what interceptors actually are in this context. So you can see from this picture, we have some kind of client application. It sends a request and it gets a response back. Typically, it would get it from a server, but in this case, Beeceptor is an interceptor, hence the word scepter, and it can basically block that request in the middle and send a response back. Now, Beeceptor is marketed as a tool that is an API replacement until the API comes. So, just to explain that, let's take an example of our own application. We are building a service for music players or like streamers, people who basically publish music. And the API we are quote unquote waiting on is an API that will tell us what type of or what genre this song is, or what type of song it is. So that could be rock, pop, and so on. And based on that, we would recommend an album cover. So as of now, since we have not implemented the API yet, nor did we find anything, we are using Beeceptor as a quote unquote backup. What that means is, to dull it down a little bit, here are two pictures, and let's say that the API gives us two responses. It's either pop or it's not pop. And if it is pop, we would use this picture, and if it is not pop, we would use this picture. Now, ideally, what we would do is we would make an API query to that particular API, and based on the response code, we would choose. But over here, we're going to use Beeceptor, and here's how. So let's first go back to the Beeceptor site, and we have to create an endpoint. There are, I think, 30 responses per day are allowed. So here we have um, created the endpoint. It's called Telegenic V2. Our V1 was rate limited. So let's create a new rule. So the first rule is album slash type one. So this is basically the API query, and the status would be this. Let's create a new one now. So you can see that the format is actually very similar to what a typical slash conventional API would be, um, because it is another API in itself, technical. So now that we have saved the rules, let's quickly go through them again. So first we can see that we have two links. If we hit this album slash type one, we get a response code of 200. Now, based on your use case, you can also change this response code and see, for example, an unauthorized API should give 403 and so on. And we can see the other one as well gives us 200 status code. Now, what we can do is we can first ping this. So let's first ping this and see how it works. So let's first copy this slash album slash v1. So we can see that we have spelled it incorrectly. So let's spell it correctly this time. And we can see that we get a response code. So let's go back to Beeceptor now, and we can see what that means. So we can see that album slash v1 is there, and album slash v1 is also there. Let's now try the actual endpoint which we had created, which is type 1. And you can see that we have our output here, which we can open and so on. And we can also open type 2. What I wanted to show with this exercise is, if you type something that doesn't exist, you do not get the output that you want, which is typical. And we can also configure this. So you can see, for example, this is type 2. We have this. As you can see here, it is not V2, it should be type 2. So let me update this now. Now that I have updated this, you can also update the routes and update the requests, and you can see we get this again. Now, let's look at how we can use this in a programmatic context. So here I've used Python because that's what we're using for part of the app, which uses this service. So we can see that the original one should be changed v2, and this function basically gives a query string. So we used type 1 and v2 before, we had changed it now to type 1 and type 2, and the type param will be inserted here. And we also send a request to the request library, and we take the JSON and we filter it by status. As you can see over here, this is JSON and it gives us the status thing here. Now, the overarching point of this demonstration is that you can see an API response, and based on that, you can code up your app. And now, when the API which you eventually wanted, which in our case is the song type API or song genre API, we can just find and replace this string. So instead of telegenic v2.free.beatceptor.com, we had to just change it to whatever the API originally was. And by configuring what a expected output of the API and the schema is, we can also change this. So that's what makes it easy, and we found it very convenient. So let's now run this and let's see how that works. So let's go to tool, albums, cover service. Let's go Beeceptor. So we can see that the function runs. Now let's call the function. So we have to print this out. Let's do that. And there you go. You can see that we get a particular output out. Now, if we run this again and again, we might get a different output as we see here because we are randomly selecting between 1 and 2. But now that we get, so we are basically mocking the genre type to make it sound more random. But if we know what the type is from the API, we can change this image and we can display it. So that was our use case with this service. And Beeceptor is actually a very useful tool, and you can also try it out for yourself. And this is how you'd use it. Thank you.